Last year, near a refugee camp, a young girl named Jalila was raped. Her father was outraged and dragged the entire family to the UN office to complain and demand action. The security officer in charge took Jalila's statement and noticed she was very uneasy. He thought it was normal, taking into consideration all that she had gone through. But next morning, she was found dead. She was killed by the same local police officer who had raped her the night before. The same police officer who was her father's best friend. Had the security officer known active listening, he might have been able to detect that something was wrong, that something was bothering Jalila more than normal. This course focuses on active listening skills for security people, security professionals, and anyone who might take advantage of it. Before we go into active listening, we need to understand the differences between passive listening and active listening. Passive listening is when you listen to each other in your everyday situation, when you talk to your parents, your family, your loved ones. There's nothing wrong with passive listening. It's just that we tend to be somewhat judgmental, both in the way we listen, our body expression, the tone of our voice, and our intentions as well. We tend to interrupt each other, to direct the conversation, so forth. In active listening, things are very different. You're supposed to remain neutral and open. The objective of active listening is two. Number one, to make sure the information is being passed, to acknowledge the person, to acknowledge his or her message, and in the process of doing that, reducing tension, which can be quite critical, especially in a security situation. Another objective of active listening is to get them to talk, and the more they talk, the more they tap into their conscience, and the more they tap into their conscience, the less control they have over the things they say. Why is that important? Because the more they talk and the less control they have, the more they reveal about themselves. And that can be both in the sense of information and value system. The more you understand the way people put their ideas together, the more you understand their values, the more you can connect to them and build a relationship and rapport. When you build a rapport, you're finally at a position in which you can influence them. Why would I need to influence anyone? Well, unless you are in a social structure like the army or the police, a very vertical and hierarchical social structure, you cannot just tell people to do things. If you're in the military, you can just say, "Lieutenant, go dig some latrines," and he'll do it. Provided you're high enough in the hierarchy, of course. But in regular everyday life, I cannot just order people to do that. I cannot just extract information from someone. I cannot just convince them to do something. For that, I need to build a rapport. I need to build a relationship. We need to connect. And that is the main goal of active listening. Not bad.
3.
Body language. Some people are very expressive. Okay. First, let's talk about body language. Some people are very expressive in the way they talk, they move their face and their hands. That's very good when you're observing them. But when you're doing active listening, you want to be a little more neutral. You may want to practice with a mirror or with a camera. You don't want to also become robotic, but you want to be open and neutral. Whatever they say, you just keep a neutral face and a neutral voice. Something else you might want to do is to give them a little bit of visual break. So instead of standing, staring them like I am right now, you might want to turn a little bit to the side. That allows them, the person who you're interviewing, a little bit of an empty space to rest his or her eyes and also to relieve some stress. The first technique I would like to talk about is minimum encouragements. And all it is are sounds or gestures that we use to let the person know that they're being listened to. They could be groans, grunts, smiles, nods. And they work by letting the person know that we're listening to them, we're paying attention, and that we're waiting for them to say whatever they want to say. So when you hear someone say, really? So? Those are minimum encouragements. There are two caveats that we use in this technique regarding security. One of them is regarding the word minimum encouragements, take one. Ricardo, you went on vacation last week. Can you tell me about it?
Yes, we went to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, flew in from New York to Myrtle Beach.
Oh, and then?
Well, from Myrtle Beach, we had to drive, or rather to South Carolina, we had to drive to the hotel.
And what happened?
Well, we got to the hotel, obviously checked in, the rooms were really nice. We did an initial sort of survey of the space, and it seemed like a nice space, and so we were prepared to have a good vacation.
Nice. And after that?
Well, that was day one. We had dinner that night, and then day two really comprised of us going to the beach and getting something to eat. Obviously, people on vacation, they do a lot of eating. And then we took a trip to a slave plantation in another part of South Carolina.
Sounds interesting.
It was very interesting, and it was interesting because it was an opportunity to see the surroundings and the quarters that the slaves had to inhabit at that time.
There is one caveat with minimum encouragements, and that is regarding the word okay. When you say okay, it tends to put ends to the conversation. And I was doing this, okay, so what? The person stops talking. Another reason why we avoid the word okay is that it may signify, in a very subtle way, agreement. So if the person says something horrendous, and then I pull up a knife and I wanted to kill him, and you said, okay, it sounds as if you're agreeing with him. So, to the best of your ability, be very cautious and avoid the word okay. Minimum encouragements, part 2. Ricardo, can you tell me about another vacation that you've taken in the past?
Sure. There was a vacation that was really probably one of the highlights of my parenting life when my wife, my daughter, and I, and my wife's Aunt Tia, we went to Florida.
Okay. Minimum encouragements, caveat 2. So, Ricardo, in your vacation, did anything happen to upset you?
Well, coincidentally, yes. While returning with my wife and daughter, as we were walking through the hotel, going back to the room, there was a guy, I presume another patron, he had a bag, and he bumped into my daughter. And I'm sure he didn't do it intentionally, but I thought at a minimum he should have said he was sorry. So as he walked by, I said, well, we forgive you. So then he turned and he said, you all should just get out of my way. And then I told him to go fuck himself.
Okay. The next technique is called open-ended questions. You probably heard about it before. When you ask someone something specific, such as, you went to the bar? Yes. Did you watch the movie? Yes or no. That doesn't say much about that person. When, however, you use an open-ended question, you leave a lot of room for them to fill in with information and their own personality. You can ask them, you went to the bar? Yes. And then what happened? Then they have all the space to fill in. Be cautious though. When you use too much open-ended question, you may give the person the idea that they're being analyzed by a psychologist. And that becomes unnatural and uncomfortable. So mix and match, but use them. Open-ended question, part 2. Ricardo, can you tell me about a movie that you really liked?
Yes. My wife and I saw a movie about a month ago called Trumbo. It was about a screenwriter in the late 50s and 60s named Dalton Trumbo, who was prosecuted convicted and went to jail and blacklisted because he was associated with the Communist Party. However, the story ends well because after coming out of prison, he continued writing under pseudonyms.
One of the most powerful techniques is called emotion labeling. And all that it means is that you're telling the person that you're listening to how you perceive their feeling. Such as, I feel that you don't like that very much. Or I can sense that that makes you worried. Or I gather that you not feel comfortable with this particular situation. Now, it's very important that you not use an accusatory language. You don't want to say, you're angry, or you're upset, because they may not be, or even if they are, they may feel defensive. When you say, I feel that you're upset, or I sense that you're upset, or I gather there's something is upsetting you, you're putting the responsibility on you. And quite frankly, it's a win-win situation. If you're right, the person feels acknowledged, listened to. And if you're wrong, you're giving them an opportunity to correct yourself. And by then, providing more information. Cut. Emotional labeling, 1, 2. Ricardo, can you tell me how you spend most of your time?
I spend most of my time performing my spousal and fatherly responsibilities when I'm not working.
I sense that there's some frustration there?
There's not frustration, it's just that when you have responsibilities, that means people count on you, and that can sometimes be daunting.
It sounds to me that you take fatherhood very seriously.
Absolutely, because my daughter didn't ask to come here.
That's actually good enough. But this next technique is called paraphrasing or summarization. And that's pretty much all it is. At some point in the conversation, you want to summarize what you have listened, what you have understood back to them. And that's a very powerful tool. Number one, because the person gets a confirmation, a pretty strong confirmation that you're listening to them. And number two, because there may be gaps on your summarization. And those gaps, they can fill it with their own information. Be careful though. Try not to fill in the gaps with what you perceive. Let them do it. Let them contribute and add to all the things they're saying already. It's a fish.
Oh.
It has a fish in the arm. Okay. Ricardo, can you tell me, do you like where you live? Do you like New York City?
I like New York City, yes, I do.
What do you like about it? Can you tell me?
I like that you don't need a car. I like that there are different kinds of people, and as a result of different kinds of people, there's different kinds of food, different types of social experiences. I like that the city has a lot of energy, but I also like that there are times, usually during the holidays, when it's quiet. So you're able to have all kinds of experiences in New York City.
So if I understand correctly, you like New York because you don't need a car, because you get to meet people from different backgrounds and have different experiences, and also because the weather is good.
Well, the weather, you know what? Yes, the weather is perfect because we have seasons, and the only season that I can say that I don't like is winter, and depending on how extreme the winter is or is not, it's probably still going to be okay because we'll be dressed appropriately. But yes, in many ways, the weather is perfect.
So you're saying that you like the weather in New York, even though it can be cold sometimes. Even though it's cold, you'd still seem to manage.
Yes, yes, because it's only in winter when the cold is arguably unbearable. And depending on how the winter is, like this winter has not been that bad, but we still have a little ways to go. The next technique is called reflecting or mirroring, and that's a little difficult to explain. There are two aspects of it. One is the physical aspect, and the other is the energy aspect. Mirroring really relies on the fact that people are naturally attracted to things that are familiar to them. If you're very quiet and timid, you kind of tend to be familiar and comfortable with people of the same nature. On the physical aspect, it means that you try to adopt the same physical characteristics of them. So if you're talking to them in a restaurant or at a bar and they cross their arms,
you can subtly do the same thing. If they like to play with their ears, you do the same thing. And that gives a subtle and unconscious message that we're on the same wavelength. Don't do it too much, or it becomes too obvious. On the energy side, it means that sometimes you may be talking to someone who has a very elevated energy level. That means they're very angry, they're very agitated. If you try to talk them down, saying, "Calm down, sir, calm down, man," it doesn't really work. And they feel that you're not acknowledging the problem, that you're not meeting them halfway, that you don't understand the gravity of the situation. So mirroring works in a way in which you match the energy level, not necessarily the volume, but you match the same intensity, and little by little you bring them down. Good.
We're ready to rock and roll now.
Ricardo, I've been looking at the records and it seems that you haven't given to us your credit card statements.
What? What credit card statements?
Well, we need those to pay for the taxi cabs that you took last week.
You need receipts. I've been on 15 trips for this organization. I have given you receipts every single time. I gave you a receipt. Why do I need a credit card statement?
Okay. I can see that you're upset, but shouting won't help.
I'm not shouting.
Well, I want to hear what you want to say, but I can't think straight when you shout.
Listen, I've been on 15 trips. I have provided you with receipts and expenditures every single time, including this last time. Now you're telling me I need to produce a copy of my credit card statement, which, as a practical matter, won't be generated for another 30 days. In addition to that, I don't believe, in fact, I know that you have not asked anyone else for a credit card statement after a business trip.
Okay, so why don't you tell me what happened?
I don't, what, do you have some kind of issue? I went on a trip, I went down to Philadelphia, I came back. In order for me to get the train tickets, I had to use my credit cards in order to get an e-ticket and receipt, and that's...
This next technique is called iMessages, and they're a little complicated, so it takes a little practice. But if done correctly, you allow you to address complicated and sensitive issues without putting the person in a defensive position. iMessages means that you say, I feel some emotion when you do something else. For example, I can say, I feel sad when you threaten my friends. Or I feel frustrated when you don't comply with what you have agreed with. And that works because it allows you to shift the topic of the conversation and the emotional part of the conversation onto you. You are the person who is feeling an emotion, not them. And you're feeling because of something that they have said or they have done. It gives them a little break and the opportunity to look at the information in a very separated context. Wait, so the camera is off. 3, 2. Ricardo, can you tell me a little about your childhood in Trinidad and Tobago?
You know, I don't really want to talk about that too much.
I feel sad when you don't engage with me. Can you tell me a little?
Well, the first 6 years of my life was spent there, but I don't really feel comfortable talking about that for... Well, you know what? I don't think you'd understand.
I feel frustrated when you don't consider me a friend. You can open up to me. Tell me anything about your childhood.
I do consider you a friend, but there are things that... certain experiences in life where we're not necessarily comfortable disclosing them, and that's one of those areas of my life. I will say, though, that I remember my Uncle Hugo showing me pornographic material.
This next technique, it's called echoing. And all it is to repeating the last word being said in a sentence. It sounds simple, and it is. And it works quite well when getting the conversation to move. In addition, you can also choose a particular word in the sentence and direct the conversation that way. For example, when I was a kid, my dad forced me to work every day in the garden. You may choose to say garden to have the conversation flow that way, or I can focus on the word forced and take the conversation to a different route. Okay? Last one, and we're done. Echoing. Ricardo, can you tell us about a family member that you have some problems with in the past?
Yes, my Uncle Hugo.
Hugo?
Hugo is my father's brother, and he was, let's just say, a bit of a character. As a teenager, he was involved in gangs. And
gangs?
Yes, was rather violent. But my memory of Uncle Hugo is that he showed me pornographic material at age 4.
4?
Yes, which probably, well, isn't appropriate, but that's my most vivid memory of Uncle Hugo. And I don't recall any sort of physical molestation, but that seemed inappropriate, and in my opinion as an adult, is inappropriate, but that's my memory of Uncle Hugo.
Inappropriate, huh?
Well, it's inappropriate, it's criminal, it's abusive, it's invidious, it's detrimental, it's deleterious, it's a whole lot of things that aren't good.
This technique is called effective silences. And that's pretty much what it is. At some point in the conversation, for emphasis or for break, you give a little silence. People are not comfortable having silences in conversations, and they tend to want to fill it in. Don't use it too much, or you may stagnate the conversation altogether. But placed in the right moment, an effective silence is golden. Effective silence, 3, 2, 1. Ricardo, can you tell us about a childhood friend that you didn't get along?
Childhood friend with whom I did not get along. Yeah, Ramon. Ramon was a Latin guy, a Latino guy, and he was maybe about 2 or 3 years older than the rest of us, and he was a bit of a bully. I mean, he had his moments when he was pleasant, but for the most part, he was a bit of a bully. And I remember he and I got into a fight, and then I went home and told my mother about the fight, and then my mother came into the street, went into the schoolyard with a machete and challenged to fight Ramon, and he backed down because of the giant machete that my mother pulled out. But that's my recollection of Ramon from when we were children. Other than that, I pretty much got along with most people.
Good.
3.
In this next section, we'll discuss 8 common and powerful techniques for active listening. Don't worry if you don't get them right away. It takes a lot of practice. Have fun and give it a try.